everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the 3D Tech Festival 2022. My name is Jordan Huggins. I will be just a quick housekeeping, your kind of quick MC up top. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Let us know where you're watching in the comments. Just jump in there. Let us know where you're watching from. Also, hello to everybody in the past from the future, or in the future from the past, excuse me. Everybody watching the recording right now, we're so glad you've chosen to spend your time with us and tune into the last day of the 2022 3D Tech Festival. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes before we kick today off. We are obviously streaming live on YouTube. I don't want to assume anyone's skill with or lack thereof with YouTube. So let me just show you around your user interface real quick so you can make the most out of today. First of all, be sure to subscribe to YouTube or Alvanon on YouTube. The subscribe button is somewhere underneath this video panel. And you can click that button. We also encourage you to get involved. Excuse me. We encourage you to get involved. Jump into the chat box right there on the right side of your screen and let us know where you're watching. You can submit comments for the speakers, questions for the speakers. We will be running some polls as well. All of that will be done through the chat box on the right side of your screen. There's some convenient little emojis to let us know and the speakers know when you love what they're saying and stuff like that. Some of the sessions today will have and we'll leave time for a Q&A. All of the questions for those speakers that we will pull from the chat box again. Any tech issues, because we moved over to YouTube, obviously, to streamline the whole festival and provide better access. But if you have any technical issues, you can, and you have access to the chat function of the chat box, just leave a comment and we will do our best to address that. If you can't, you can also email us at marketing@alvanon.com and you can find all of that information on 3dtechfestival.com. Recordings. All of these sessions this year are being recorded. They will be available. Day 1, day 2 are already available on our YouTube. The whole full days are available. And today's sessions, this full video will be available pretty much immediately after the stream ends this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. But all of the recordings will be available. The individual recordings will be available on 3dtechfest.com. You can go on there, you can register, create an account, a member account, and you'll have access to all the sessions forever on that website there. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand it off to your host, your main host and MC, and the brains behind the 3D Tech Festival. Please help me in welcoming the CEO of Alvanon, Janice Wang, everybody. Hi, Janice. Good morning. Take it away.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. It's the last day. It's the last day. I just wanted to tell you today, I want to just little recap about yesterday. End of yesterday, yesterday we talked about good business. And good business means that you actually have to do doing good and you have to do business. And actually sometimes those are two different things. So we actually talked a lot about authenticity, and we had a lot of great speakers talk about all, where they got their kind of identity from, and also how they're actually using all of the digital tools to be able to, combat all of those things. The other thing that we actually talked about at the end was, if you want to be inclusive, you actually have to execute really, really well. So we ended with a technical masterclass. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Ben Hanson. Now, Ben and I have had these long conversations over the years. Ben is the editor of the Interline. And, it's really great for us to have these conversations, because a lot of those ideas that we actually have from what we see are so aligned. So, Jordan, would you please bring up Ben? Hi, Ben.
Hello, Janice. Hi, how are you doing?
Wonderful. Now, Ben is going to help us synthesize today because apparently I can't speak very well anymore. But I hope that everybody, you'll stay till the end of the day, because we have a really wonderful conversation that's going to happen. And, well, because we have sneak peeks, being the organizers, we know that Walmart's going to make a little bit of a big announcement. So it's really exciting for all of us. Now, over to you, Ben. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Janice. Let me join you in welcoming everybody to the very first day, the very third day, I should say, of the 3D Tech Fest. If you've had the pleasure of attending the previous 2 days, you'll have already seen you've already had a reality check. You'll have already had kind of a sense check, a bit of a benchmark for where digital product creation is at. And yesterday, as Janice just mentioned, you've had an overview of good business, which is the mechanics of actually doing successful commerce, but it's also the long overdue drive and all of the tools and all the processes and the mindset and cultural shift that's enabling a long overdue transition towards a more inclusive, adaptive fashion industry. Today, we want to get into a different topic. Today, we want to talk about where digital product creation is headed from here and why. What does the future hold for digitization in general? We've got 8 really good sessions lined up today. Like Janice said, I get a little preview of the agenda here as well, and I know that there's a lot of great content coming up. So I don't want to steal too much time from the people who are going to be presenting that content. What I do want to do, though, is pull from some of those conversations that Janice and I have had behind the scenes over the last couple of years, and give you my perspective on where I think digital product creation is going and why I believe the future of digitization involves taking DPC, so DPC, digital product creation, don't want to take that as read and just chuck that acronym around, but that's what I mean when I say it. Why I believe DPC workflows, the future of them is going to involve taking them out of boxes that they've been placed in and de-compartmentalizing them. So if you'll humor me for a few minutes, I'll set down some context. I'll give you my take on a few things. I'm then going to introduce the agenda for the day. And I'm going to hand over to the first speaker when we get there. I'm going to pop back up in between each of the sessions. So you got plenty of chance to get sick of me if you aren't by this point already. And I will also be jumping in and helping to put some of your questions to the speakers as well. So whatever your platform you're watching on, if you're able to put a question in, we will do our very best to get to it live. I'll do my very best to be your voice in those conversations. So first things first, who am I? Why should you care? Why should you listen to what I think about the future of digital product creation? So as Janice very well teed up, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Interline. If you haven't come across us before, we're a full spectrum technology publication for fashion professionals, fully free to read, fully web-based. Everything we do is free to download, free to access. So no strings attached, nothing, you don't lose anything by checking it out. So feel free to investigate us sometime. We've only been running for, now is about our 3rd year, but we've actually had a much longer term focus on digital product creation. Let me explain what I mean by that, because that seems kind of contradictory. In the few years that the Interline has been running, we've seen a huge amount of disruption take place in the industry and take place in the world as a whole. And that has dramatically kickstarted and accelerated the fashion industry's drive towards digital native workflows. So a huge amount of change has been compressed into the last few years, which just happens to be the lifespan of the Interline as well. But my history and the roots of the Interline lie with a previous publication, which PLM, focused on product lifecycle management for the apparel industry. And over the years, that publication also dived deep into 3D workflows, digital product creation. I did a deep dive report on 3D, as we called it, kind of the umbrella term we gave it back then in 2015, so 7 years ago. Things have come a long way since then from a technology point of view, and things have come a long way since then from an adoption and an uptake perspective as well. But there's still a good way to go, I believe, from an industry level, and we're going to get into that today. And I think some of the messages that I put out are going to be underlined and underscored by some of the speakers that follow as well. Crucially, the Interline is, we kind of act as intermediaries in a way in a conversation between technology vendors who are providing solutions to unlock digital native ways of working, digital product creation workflows, and the brand customers, retail customers, manufacturing customers who want to make use of those tools to scale their ability to generate 3D assets and their ability to extract value from those 3D assets. And that gives us a perspective on where things are going. And the scale of those assets that really takes us to what I see as both the future of digital product creation, but also it gives us a good kind of watermark for industry-wide maturity in that area at the moment. Because if you see where an asset is required or where an asset would be beneficial, by an asset I mean a 3D replica as close as possible to an original garment, piece of footwear, accessory. If you take a look at where that's needed or where it would be beneficial, the workflows and the tools will always have to follow that design. So if you consider a 3D asset today, they are vital to streamlining current value chain operations, right? There are a huge number of use cases for 3D assets, garment digital twins, whatever you want to call them, everywhere from bringing initial concepts to life, to reviewing, to doing line review, to doing assortment planning, to making fit decisions and things internally, then upstream in terms of supply chain operations, right the way downstream through e-commerce utilization, product configurators. They're also fundamental to a lot of the conversation around where the fashion industry wants to go with business models of the future. Now, some of those are still tied to physical products, the things that you mentioned, that were discussed yesterday, that Janice mentioned, a more inclusive size ranges and ratios, a more adaptive way to approach the industry, a more demand-driven production model, perhaps, those kinds of things. But when you start to think about an industry that is rushing headlong towards wanting to sell digital goods, towards having a digital business model as well, that is not something you can have without having a huge volume of digital assets in the right formats and in the right level of fidelity and in the right applications and the right ecosystems that you need them in. Which leads us to a situation today where we at the Interline believe that digital assets are in historically high demand, but also currently in relatively low supply. So what do I mean by that, right? I mean, there's a mismatch between what the fashion industry wants as its output from digital product creation and what it currently has as its inputs to digital product creation. So if we take it as read that DPC is fundamental to the future of fashion, which, as we just talked about, it's very deeply ingrained in the way that the industry approaches the creation of physical products, and whether it's streamlining, improving efficiency, improving sustainability, cutting out sample iterations and improving time to market. It's a huge amount in the established fashion workflow that relies on digital product creation and digital assets, or whether it's those future business models that rely on it. And the vision there is to have a digital asset that can stand in for the physical counterpart every time a decision needs to be made. So if you're making a decision around what material to use from an aesthetic perspective, that's a decision that you as a brand ought to be able to take based on a 3D asset. You're taking the same decision on something objective like fit or sizing. You're taking the same decision on anywhere else effective on a material, anywhere else effectively that you would take a choice on based on a physical asset. A digital asset should be able to serve that purpose, which means you need digital assets to be two things. You need them to exist in sufficient volume to allow you to make all of those decisions across the full spectrum of your products and categories. And that's very, very, very rarely the case for any brand, really. You often find that digital product creation, 3D workflows they're confined to one particular business unit. They're confined to one particular product category. They're confined to one particular, even one particular season as a pilot, something like that. So they need to exist in sufficient volume. They also need to exist in sufficient fidelity and complexity and completeness to serve everywhere that a physical asset would serve. And in a lot of cases, that's also not the case either. You may find that the 3D asset is being used for prototyping and sampling and fit. It's not the same 3D asset is then not being used downstream. Or you may find that physical products are being created and then they're being scanned in, and those scans are what are making their way down to e-commerce. Or there's a disconnect between technical specifications and the 3D assets that are sent through to suppliers. Either way, it is incredibly rare at the moment to find a whole value chain that runs on digital the way that it should do. And but nevertheless, that's what the fashion industry wants. That is what the industry is expecting, is that output where a digital asset can do everything. To get there, there's going to need to be some overhauls and some scaling and some growth to the input. And my contention is that this creates a very pressing need for the industry to move from kind of what traditionally been quite isolated, compartmentalized 3D workflows to a more complete DPC ecosystem. So you'll often find that 3D is only done in footwear, for example, or 3D is only done for X number of styles, or 3D is only done by a smaller number of people, or it's not done to the right fidelity. It's often seen as supplemental or additional or as a bolt-on to a brand, retailer, or manufacturer's ways of working. To get around that disparity between input and output, what the industry needs is to take it out of the box. You need to move away from thinking of 3D as that add-on to thinking of it instead as the way that you need to work, as being the actual engine of it, such that the brand moves eventually and the value chain moves eventually towards being not digital asset driven, but wholly digitally native. So, as I mentioned, there's 8 really great sessions lined up for today. I'm not going to take any more time away from each of them. I am going to pop up in between them, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we have coming up now before I hand on to the first one. But I know that there's a lot lined up today that I think is going to support some of what I've said. Equally, if there's stuff lined up today, and any of our speakers want to challenge some of what I've said, I'm very open to having that conversation as well. So let me walk you through some of the topics we're going to be covering today. I'm not going to go into names here, not least because I can't memorize all of them, but primarily because I think what I want to focus on here are the themes that we're going to be covering. And I'm also operating on Eastern Standard Time here, on New York time, even though I'm in the UK, as you can tell by the accent. So if you hear me accidentally slip away from saying 9 o'clock to saying 2 o'clock or something, don't worry, you haven't got the agenda completely wrong. It's that there's a time zone difference in my head. Very shortly, I'm going to be handing over to the team at Gap, and they're going to be talking about cultivating a change culture, and that extends into leveraging digital expertise that exists in the supply chain. That's at 9:15. At 9:45, the team at Browser are going to be talking about taking 3D assets. It's very similar to what I've just described, upstream to downstream, so maximizing the value of 3D assets across the supply chain. Then at 10:05, we have a panel discussion, which is around what does digitization really mean when you're a manufacturer? What is the drive for digital product creation, digital native workflows in the supply chain at source? Half an hour after that, I'll pop up again and I'll introduce Style 3D, and they're going to be talking about selling digitally from the mill to the consumer. So this is another perspective on the long time kind of value extension of digital assets. At 11:05, we're talking about the secrets to trusted 3D. I'm going to keep that one slightly opaque because there's a few different angles being covered under there. At 11:30, Calypso, we're going to be talking about why we are now in digital product creation's teenage years, which is to say, you've had the childhood, the adulthood is around the corner, you're in that tricky kind of hormonal adolescent period that exists between those two things. How does the industry manage that to get to here in the right way? Then at 12 o'clock, we have a pre-recorded session, which is around intellectual property and the digital age. So there's some implications for both business models, kind of existing physical and future digital. And then finally, I'll be handing back over to Janice, who's going to introduce the one-to-one conversation and the secret announcement that she mentioned, which is in the conversation between Ron Lewis and the Walmart folks.